I stand at the edge of a railway platform in Ploiești, Romania. The year is 1941, June. Summer heat shimmers above the tracks, distorting the air until distance becomes liquid and uncertain. But beneath that heat, beneath the wavering horizon, there is another scent: petroleum, crude oil, refined gasoline. It saturates everything here. The air tastes of it. When you breathe, it coats the back of your throat with a bitter chemical film. Your clothing absorbs it within minutes. Your hair smells of it. Your skin carries traces of benzene and octane compounds that no amount of washing can fully remove. The workers here, thousands of them, have long since stopped noticing. For them, this is simply what air smells like, what the world smells like. But for a visitor, for someone new to this place, the realization hits immediately. This is not a city. This is not a town. This is an industrial organ, a beating heart, an artery that pumps black blood through the veins of an empire. Around me, refineries stretch toward every compass point. 11 major installations, 1,700 individual processing units. Steel towers that rise 40, 50, 60 meters into the sky. Cracking columns where crude oil is superheated to 370 degrees Celsius, breaking long-chain hydrocarbons into shorter, more volatile molecules. Distillation towers, where different fuel grades are separated by boiling point. Gasoline at 70 degrees, kerosene at 150, diesel at 250. Flames burn at the top of flare stacks, consuming excess gas day and night without pause. The flames never extinguish. Even in rain, even in wind, they burn, orange tongues of fire against grey industrial skies. At night, they light the surrounding countryside with an unholy glow that can be seen from 60 kilometers away. This is Ploiești. This is Romania's gift to the Third Reich. This is where empires come to drink. The statistics are staggering. Beneath these refineries, beneath the industrial sprawl and worker housing and railway sidings, lie 350 million barrels of proven crude oil reserves. 350 million, a standard oil barrel, contains 159 liters. Multiply that by 350 million. That is 55,650,000,000 liters of crude oil. Enough to fill 74,000 Olympic swimming pools. Enough to power every automobile in Germany for 32 years at 1941 consumption rates. But crude oil means nothing until it is refined. And Ploiești refines crude oil with devastating efficiency. In 1941, these 11 installations produce 5.7 million metric tons of petroleum products annually. 5.7 million metric tons equals approximately 7 billion liters of refined fuel. Each day, Ploiești produces 19 million liters. Each hour, 791,000 liters. Each minute, 13,185 liters. While you have been standing here reading these words, Ploiești has produced enough fuel to drive a Panzer IV tank from Berlin to Moscow. And where does this fuel go? 60% flows to Germany. Not 50%, not half. 60% of all German fuel requirements, every drop of gasoline that powers every Wehrmacht truck, every liter of aviation fuel that launches every Luftwaffe sortie, every barrel of diesel that moves every Panzer division 60%, originates here in these Romanian oil fields. Without Ploiești, the Third Reich's war machine stops, not slows, stops. A locomotive approaches from the marshalling yards to the east. I hear it before I see it. The deep, rhythmic chuffing of a coal-fired steam engine under load. The sound grows louder. The platform beneath my feet begins to vibrate with each piston stroke. Then it rounds the final curve and comes into view. Class 50 locomotive. German-designed, Romanian-built. Driving wheel diameter, 1,400 millimeters. Boiler pressure, 16 bar, 232 pounds per square inch. Coal capacity, 10 metric tons. Water capacity, 34 cubic meters. Maximum speed, 80 kilometers per hour. Actual average speed when hauling heavy freight over mountainous terrain, 47 kilometers per hour. Behind the locomotive, 72 freight cars trail in a long snaking line. Tank cars, each one cylindrical, painted dark grey, marked with yellow hazard diamonds. Each car is 11.8 meters long. Each weighs 8.3 metric tons empty. Each carries 23,000 liters of refined fuel when loaded. I do the mathematics automatically now. 72 cars. 23,000 liters per car. 1,656,000 liters total. 1.6 million liters on a single train. How much war does 1.6 million liters represent? A Panzer IV tank carries 470 liters of fuel internally, plus an additional 200 liters in auxiliary jerry cans. Under combat conditions, constant maneuvering, frequent acceleration, operation of turret hydraulics and radio equipment, that Panzer IV consumes fuel at a rate of approximately 320 liters per 100 kilometers travel. 1.6 million liters could fuel 2,380 Panzer IV tanks for 100 kilometers each. Or it could fuel 238 tanks for 1,000 kilometers each, the distance from the Polish border to Moscow. Or consider aircraft. A Messerschmitt Bf-109G fighter carries 400 liters of fuel, a typical combat mission takeoff. Climb to 6,000 meters, patrol for 90 minutes, engage enemy aircraft, return to base consumes approximately 340 liters. 1.6 million liters could launch 4,705 Bf-109 sorties. One train. 4,705 fighter missions. 4,705 opportunities to shoot down enemy bombers. 4,705 chances to achieve air superiority over a battlefield. The locomotive pulls alongside the platform. The brakes engage with a metallic shriek. Steam vents from pressure release valves. The train shudders to a halt. A man emerges from the station master's office. Romanian, in his late 40s. He wears a dark uniform with railway insignia on the collar. His name is Ion Popescu. He has been the train master here for 8 years since 1933, when these platforms were expanded to accommodate increased fuel shipments. Back then, the primary customer was France. Then it was Britain. Now it is Germany. Popescu has seen the customers change, but the product remains constant. Oil. Always oil. He carries a clipboard. On it, manifest documents list every car in this train. Car number, fuel grade, volume, destination, priority code. He checks each car systematically, comparing the manifest against the yellow identification plates welded to each tank car's side. Car 47 contains aviation gasoline, octane rating 97, 23,000 liters. Destination, Luftwaffe depot at Wiener Neustadt. Priority, urgent. Car 48 contains diesel fuel, cetane rating 45, 23,000 liters. Destination Wehrmacht Quartermaster Corps. Vienna. Priority. Routine. Urgent. Routine. These words determine whether fighter aircraft fly tomorrow or sit grounded, whether tank divisions advance or remain stationary, whether the war continues or collapses. Popescu completes his inspection. Everything is correct. Everything is accounted for. He signs the manifest. He hands the paperwork to the locomotive engineer, a German, a Bavarian named Otto Schmidt. Schmidt has made this journey 83 times before. He knows every kilometer of track between here and Vienna. He knows where the grades are steep, where the curves are sharp, where the bridges are weight restricted. He knows which sections have been bombed and hastily repaired. He knows which tunnels echo with the sound of laboring engines. Schmidt nods. He climbs back into the locomotive cab. His fireman Younger, from Saxony, begins shoveling coal into the firebox. The fire inside roars hotter. The boiler pressure gauge needle climbs. 200 pounds per square inch. 210. 220. The whistle sounds. 2 sharp blasts. A pause. 1 long blast. The locomotive's driving wheels begin to turn. Slowly at first. The connecting rods rise and fall. The pistons stroke. Steam hisses. The wheels grip the rails. The train lurches forward. 72 tank cars follow. 1,656,000 liters of fuel begin their journey north. Destination, Germany. Distance, 2,100 kilometers. Travel time, 6 days under optimal conditions. But conditions are rarely optimal. In 1941, Ion Popescu watches the train depart. He has done this 312 times before. Watched trains loaded with Romanian oil leave this platform bound for foreign armies. 312. He keeps count, though he does not fully understand why. Perhaps because someone must bear witness. Perhaps because numbers provide certainty in an uncertain world. The train disappears around the eastern curve. The sound of its engine fades. The platform returns to its baseline state. The smell of petroleum, the heat shimmer, the distant rumble of refinery machinery. In 6 hours, another train will arrive. In 8 hours, Popescu will oversee another loading. In 12 hours, another 1,000,000 liters will depart for Germany. This is the rhythm of Ploiești in 1941. This is the heartbeat of the Third Reich's war machine. Every 12 hours, a pulse of fuel flows north. Every 12 hours, Germany's armies and air forces receive the lifeblood they require to continue fighting. But rhythms can be interrupted, hearts can be stopped, arteries can be severed, and there are men already planning how to do exactly that. War is arithmetic before it is anything else. Commanders speak of courage and determination. Soldiers sing songs about homeland and honor. Propagandists craft narratives of destiny and inevitable victory. But beneath all that noise, beneath the speeches and the flags and the martial music, there exists a simpler truth. War is addition and subtraction. How many tons of supplies do you have? How many tons do you consume daily? Subtract consumption from supply. If the result is positive, you continue fighting. If the result is negative, you begin dying. The Third Reich, in June 1941, operates the largest military machine in human history. Let us count its components. The Wehrmacht, the German armed forces, consists of 3.8 million active soldiers. These soldiers require food, clothing, ammunition, medical supplies, and above all else, mobility. Mobility requires fuel. The Wehrmacht operates 5,600 tanks as of June 1941. These are not the massive Tigers and Panthers that will dominate later in the war. Those designs are still on drawing boards. These are primarily Panzer III and Panzer IV medium tanks, along with older Panzer I and Panzer II light tanks and captured Czech and French vehicles pressed into service. A Panzer III Ausführung J, the most common variant in 1941, weighs 22 metric tons fully loaded. It carries a 50mm main gun and 3 7.92mm machine guns. Maximum armor thickness is 50mm on the turret front. Maximum speed is 40 km per hour on roads, 18 km per hour cross-country. Range, 155 km on internal fuel. And the fuel consumption? This is where the mathematics become unforgiving. The Panzer III's Maybach HL120 TRM engine produces 300 horsepower. It burns gasoline, not diesel. Gasoline at a rate of 270 liters per 100 kilometers when operating under combat conditions. Combat conditions mean frequent acceleration and deceleration, operation at maximum engine RPM, maneuvering over rough terrain, extended idling while hull down, in defensive positions with the engine running to power electrical systems, 5,600 tanks. Let us assume that on average, each tank travels 50 kilometers per day during active operations. 50 kilometers at 270 liters per 100 kilometers consumed equals 135 liters per tank per day. 5,600 tanks multiplied by 135 liters equals 756,000 liters per day. Multiply by 30 days, 22,680,000 liters per month. But tanks are merely the beginning. The Wehrmacht operates approximately 300,000 trucks, half-tracks, and other motorized vehicles. Fuel consumption varies, but a typical Opel Blitz 3-ton cargo truck, the backbone of German logistics, consumes 40 liters per 100 kilometers. If each vehicle travels an average of 80 kilometers per day, that is 32 liters per vehicle per day. 300,000 vehicles consume 9,600,000 liters daily. That's 28.8 million liters monthly. Now, the Luftwaffe. In June 1941, the Luftwaffe operates 9,300 combat aircraft. The breakdown: 4,200 single-engine fighters, 1,800 twin-engine fighters and night fighters, 2,400 medium bombers, 1,000 dive bombers, and 900 long-range reconnaissance and transport aircraft. A Messerschmitt Bf-109E fighter, still the dominant variant in mid-1941, carries 440 liters of fuel in its internal tanks. A standard combat mission lasts approximately 2 hours and consumes 370 liters. If each fighter flies one sortie per day during active operations, 4,200 fighters consume 1,554,000 liters daily. Medium bombers are worse. A Junkers Ju-88, a bomber, carries 1,680 liters of fuel. A typical bombing mission consumes 1,300 liters. 2,400 bombers, flying one sortie daily, consume 3,120,000 liters. Add fighters and bombers, 4,674,000 liters daily for Luftwaffe operations. That's 140,220,000 liters monthly. But we are not finished. The Kriegsmarine, the German Navy, operates 463 submarines, 3 battleships, 5 heavy cruisers, 6 light cruisers, and approximately 150 destroyers and smaller vessels. A Type 7 U-boat, the most common submarine, carries 113 metric tons of diesel fuel. A typical Atlantic patrol lasts 8 weeks and consumes approximately 90 metric tons. If 1/4 of the U-boat fleet is at sea at any given time, that's 116 submarines. 90 metric tons per patrol divided by 8 weeks equals 11.25 metric tons per week, or 45 metric tons per month per submarine. 116 submarines consume 5,220 metric tons monthly. At 0.84 kilograms per liter for diesel fuel, that equals 6,214,000 liters monthly for submarines alone. Surface vessels consume far more, but their operational tempo is lower due to Allied naval superiority. Estimate another 8 million liters monthly for all surface fleet operations. Now we sum the components. Wehrmacht, ground vehicles, 28.8 million liters monthly. Panzer divisions, 22.7 million liters monthly. Luftwaffe, 140.2 million liters monthly. Kriegsmarine, 14.2 million liters monthly. Total, 205.9 million liters monthly for combat operations alone. But combat operations are not the complete picture. Add training flights for new pilots. Add fuel for generators at air bases, naval bases, headquarters facilities. Add fuel for transport aircraft moving supplies and personnel. Add fuel for construction equipment, building fortifications. Add fuel for agricultural tractors growing food in occupied territories. The comprehensive total, approximately 300 million liters of fuel consumed monthly by German military forces in mid-1941. 300 million liters every 30 days, without fail. And where does this fuel originate? Germany produces synthetic fuel through the Fischer-Tropsch process, a chemical method developed in the 1920s that converts coal into liquid hydrocarbons. It is expensive. It is complex. It requires massive infrastructure. But it works. In 1941, Germany operates 9 major coal liquefaction plants. Leuna in Saxony-Anhalt, Politz in Pomerania, Blechhammer in Upper Silesia, Uhlen near Leipzig, Zeitz in Thuringia, Lützgendorf in Saxony-Anhalt, Wessling near Cologne, Bruggs in the Sudetenland, and Moosbierbaum in Austria. Combined, these 9 plants produce 8 million metric tons of synthetic fuel annually. 8 million metric tons equals approximately 9.5 billion liters annually. Divide by 12 months. 791,666,000 liters monthly. This seems sufficient. Germany produces 792 million liters monthly. Germany consumes 300 million liters monthly for military operations. That leaves 492 million liters for civilian use, strategic reserves, and export to allies. But there is a problem with synthetic fuel. It requires 4.0 metric tons of coal to produce 1 metric ton of gasoline through the Fischer-Tropsch process. The efficiency ratio is catastrophically poor. Germany must mine 32 million metric tons of coal annually just to feed the synthetic fuel plants. That coal cannot be used for electricity generation, steel production, or heating civilian homes. The synthetic fuel program effectively cannibalizes other critical sectors of the German economy. Moreover, Coal liquefaction requires massive amounts of electrical power. The plant at Luna alone consumes 850 megawatt-hours daily, enough electricity to power a city of 200,000 people. Building additional synthetic fuel capacity would require constructing new coal mines, new power plants, new chemical processing facilities. The timeline for such expansion: 3 to 5 years under peacetime conditions. Germany does not have 3 to 5 years. Germany has invaded Poland in 1939, France in 1940, and will invade the Soviet Union in less than 3 weeks from this moment, in June 1941. This is where Romanian oil becomes indispensable. Conventional crude oil extraction costs approximately 1/7 the price of synthetic fuel production per liter. No coal required. No complex chemical processes. Simply drill wells, pump crude oil to the surface, transport it to refineries, distill it through established processes, and ship the finished product. Romania produces 5.7 million metric tons of petroleum products annually, 7 billion liters. Germany imports 5.8 million metric tons of Romanian oil in 1941. That represents approximately 62% of Romanian total production, and more critically, it represents 43% of total German fuel supply. 43%, nearly half. Let us examine what happens if Romanian oil vanishes. Total German fuel supply: 792 million liters monthly from synthetic production, plus 483 million liters monthly from Romanian imports, equals 1.2 billion liters monthly. German military consumption: 300 million liters monthly. German civilian consumption: approximately 700 million liters monthly. Total consumption: 1 billion liters monthly. Surplus: 275 million liters monthly for strategic reserves. Now remove Romanian oil. Total supply: 792 million liters monthly from synthetic production only. Total consumption: 1 billion liters monthly. Deficit: 208 million liters monthly. 208 million liters short. Every month. The strategic reserves would be exhausted in approximately 8 months. After that, Germany would need to reduce fuel consumption by 21% across all sectors, military and civilian combined. A 21% reduction means grounding 1/5 of the Luftwaffe. It means immobilizing 1/5 of all Panzer divisions. It means reducing U-boat patrols by 1/5. It means rationing civilian transport to starvation levels, and there is no way to increase synthetic fuel production fast enough to compensate. Building a new coal liquefaction plant requires 2 to 3 years. Expanding existing plants requires 18 months minimum. Germany cannot solve this problem through engineering or willpower. Germany can only solve this problem by maintaining control of Romanian oil fields. Adolf Hitler knows this. Hermann Göring, commander of the Luftwaffe and director of the 4-year Plan for Economic Development, knows this. General Friedrich Paulus, deputy chief of the Army General Staff, knows this. Every logistics officer in the Oberkommando der Wehrmacht knows this. Ploiești is not simply an oil field. Ploiești is the circulatory system of the Third Reich. It is the fuel that powers the tanks, the gasoline that launches the aircraft, the diesel that moves the submarines. Cut that artery, and the entire organism begins to die. This is not metaphor, this is mathematics. The question is not whether Germany depends on Romanian oil. Germany does, absolutely, and without alternative. The question is, does anyone possess the means to sever that dependency? The answer, in June 1941, is not yet. But they are working on it. June 15th, 1943. 2 years have passed since we stood on the platform at Ploiești. The war has changed. Germany has invaded the Soviet Union, advanced to within sight of Moscow, then being thrown back with catastrophic losses. Stalingrad has fallen not to German forces, but around them, consuming an entire German army in a frozen meat grinder that cost 330,000 casualties. The tide is turning, but the fuel still flows. I stand now beside the railway tracks 327 kilometers northwest of Ploiești, near the Hungarian border. The location is unimportant. Just another anonymous stretch of rail running through agricultural countryside. Fields of wheat on one side, forest on the other. A small station house, unmanned at this hour. A signal tower painted in fading yellow and black stripes. It is 14:20 hours. The afternoon sun beats down. The steel rails shimmer with heat. If you placed your hand on the rail surface, you would pull it back instantly. The metal is hot enough to raise blisters. I hear the train before I see it. The sound travels far across flat terrain. A deep, rhythmic exhaust note, slightly out of sync with the clatter of wheels on rail joints. Then it rounds the distant curve, perhaps 2 kilometers away, and comes into view. The same locomotive, the same Class 50 engine that departed Ploiești in 1941. It has made this journey 47 times. Now, 47 trips, hauling fuel from Romania to Germany. The engineer, Otto Schmidt, has been at the controls for 46 of those trips. He missed one journey due to illness in February 1943. Schmidt is 51 years old. He has worked for Deutsche Reichsbahn for 23 years since 1920, when he returned from the previous war. He served in that war as an infantry soldier, survived 4 years in the trenches, and decided that if he lived through it, he would never carry a rifle again. So he became a railway engineer. He drives trains. He does not ask what cargo they carry. He does not question the destinations. He simply maintains steam pressure, watches the signals, and delivers his trains on schedule. 46 successful trips. 46 times approximately 1.6 million litres of fuel delivered to German distribution centres. Multiply 73,600,000 litres transported by this single engineer, in this single locomotive, over the course of 2 years. Enough fuel to power the entire Sixth Army at Stalingrad for 6 additional days. 6 days might have made the difference between encirclement and breakout. 6 days might have saved 330,000 soldiers. But those 6 days' worth of fuel did not go to Stalingrad. They went elsewhere. To other armies, other battles, other decisions made by commanders who never knew that Otto Schmidt existed. The locomotive approaches the signal tower where I stand. Steam vents from the pressure relief valves. The brakes are not applied. This is a minor station, not a scheduled stop. The train will pass through at full speed, 64 kilometers per hour, slightly below its maximum capability due to the load being hauled. Behind the locomotive, 72 tank cars follow. They are the same cars that departed Ploiești in 1941, or at least cars identical in every specification. Each one is 11.8 meters long, 8.3 metric tons empty weight, 23,000 liters capacity when loaded. But look closer at these tank cars. Look at the paint. The dark grey finish is scratched and faded. Look at the undercarriages. The axle journals show wear. The wheel treads are slightly flattened from repeated heavy loads. These cars have traveled over 100,000 kilometers in 2 years. The design life expectancy for freight cars under heavy use, 15 years. At current usage rates, these cars will last another 7 years until 1950 before structural fatigue makes them unsafe. Except the war will end before 1950. These cars will never reach their design life expectancy. Some will be destroyed in bombing raids. Some will be captured by advancing Allied forces. Some will simply be abandoned beside tracks when there is no longer any fuel to transport. But today, in June 1943, they still serve their purpose. The lead tank car passes me. I can read the identification plate, welded to its side. Car 4719. Construction date, April 1938. Capacity, 23,000 liters. Current cargo, aviation gasoline, octane rating 97. Destination Luftwaffe Depot, Wiener Neustadt. Car 4720 follows. Diesel fuel, Satana rating 45. Destination, Wehrmacht Quartermaster Corps, Vienna. Car 4721. Lubricating oil, viscosity grade 30. Destination, Panzer Maintenance Depot, Linz. Each car passes in a steady rhythm. The wheels clatter over rail joints, click-clack, click-clack, click-clack. The sound is almost musical, almost peaceful. You could listen to this sound and forget what is being transported. You could hear only the rhythm and not think about the purpose. But I cannot forget. I am the chronicler. I remember what others choose to ignore. These 72 tank cars contain the fuel for 6,420 individual tank kills, not tank kilometers traveled. Tank kills. The number of enemy tanks that will be destroyed by the Panzer divisions receiving this fuel. Statisticians calculated this after the war. For every 1,000 liters of fuel consumed by German armored forces, 1.6 enemy tanks were destroyed on average. 1,656,000 liters divided by 1,000 multiplied by 1.6 equals 2,650 enemy tanks. 2,650 tanks means approximately 7,950 enemy soldiers killed or wounded, assuming 3 crew members per tank. 7,950 human beings whose deaths are enabled by the train now passing before me. This is not a condemnation of Otto Schmidt. He is a railway engineer. He transports cargo, but this is a recognition of what cargo means in wartime. Every liter of fuel has a body count attached to it. Every successful fuel delivery enables additional violence. And the fuel deliveries continue, week after week, month after month, because the arithmetic demands it. The final tank car passes, car 4790, the end of the train. A red lantern hangs from the rear coupling, signaling to following trains that this is the end of the consist, not of broken coupling or lost cars. The sound of the locomotive fades. The clatter of wheels on rails diminishes. Within 90 seconds, the train has disappeared around the northern curve, heading toward Budapest, then Vienna, then Germany. I stand alone beside the tracks again. The rails are still warm from the passage of 2,400 metric tons of steel and fuel traveling at 64 kilometers per hour. How fragile this system is. One section of damaged track could derail this train. One destroyed bridge could halt all traffic for weeks. One well-placed bomb could turn 1,656,000 liters of fuel into an inferno visible from 30 kilometers away. The Germans understand this fragility. They deploy anti-aircraft batteries along the route, 88mm flak guns positioned at bridges, tunnels, and major junctions. They station repair crews at strategic locations, ready to fix damaged track within hours. They maintain alternate routes where possible, though the mountainous terrain limits options. But there is a deeper fragility that no amount of defensive preparation can address. There is only one bridge across the Danube at Giurgiu, only one tunnel through the Carpathian Mountains at Predil Pass, only 3 major rail junctions capable of handling heavy fuel transports between Ploiești and Vienna. Destroy those bottlenecks, and the entire system collapses. And high above, at 9,000 meters altitude, reconnaissance aircraft from the United States Army Air Forces photograph this route daily. They map every bridge, every tunnel, every rail yard. They note the frequency of train movements. They estimate cargo volumes based on the number of tank cars. They identify repair depots and supply caches. They are building a target database. And when the time comes when enough bombers are available, when fighter escorts have sufficient range, when weather conditions permit sustained operations, they will strike. Not today, not in June 1943, but soon. The Allies are learning what the Germans already know. War is logistics, and logistics travel on railways. Cut the railways, and armies starve. Cut the fuel supply, and the war ends. August 1st, 1943, 0702 hours, Benghazi, Libya. The first B-24 begins its takeoff roll. The 4 Pratt & Whitney engines roar at full throttle. The bomber accelerates down the runway slowly at first, burdened by 32,000 kilograms of fuel and bombs, then faster as airspeed builds. At 160 kilometers per hour, the pilot pulls back on the yoke. The nose lifts. The main gear loses contact with the runway. The bomber climbs, gradually, laboriously, into the morning sky. 1 down. 176 to go. Every 45 seconds, another bomber takes off. The precision is remarkable, the result of months of training and planning. By 0755 hours, all 177 aircraft are airborne. They circle over the Mediterranean, forming up into their assigned formations. 9 aircraft per squadron, 3 squadrons per group, 5 groups total. From the ground, the sight is magnificent. 177 heavy bombers, arranged in precise geometric formation. Sunlight glinting off aluminum fuselages. Contrails streaming behind at higher altitudes. The sound of 708 engines echoes across the desert coast. This is American industrial power made manifest. Each B-24 costs $297,000. $52.6 million of aircraft overhead right now. Each crew has received over 1 year of training at a cost of approximately $40,000 per man, $7.08 million of human capital investment. The bombs they carry cost approximately $150 per 1,000-pound unit, $106,000 of ordnance. Total visible cost, $59.7 million, flying in formation toward Romania. But the true cost will be calculated later. In lives, in burning aircraft, in men who bail out over enemy territory and spend the next 2 years in prisoner of war camps, in families who receive telegrams beginning with the words, "We regret to inform you." The formation turns north. Destination, Ploiești. Time to target, 5 hours and 58 minutes. August 1st, 1943, 11:47 hours. Approaching the Yugoslav coast. The formation has been flying for 4 hours and 45 minutes. The crews are tired. The cockpits are hot. The Mediterranean sun turns the aluminum fuselages into ovens. The noise is relentless. 4 engines per aircraft producing over 100 decibels of sound that penetrates through helmets and insulation. But they are on schedule. The navigation is precise. They cross the Yugoslav coast at exactly 11:50 hours, 3 minutes ahead of the planned timeline. And then everything begins to go wrong. The lead navigator makes an error. A single wrong turn near the town of Ploiești. Instead of approaching Ploiești from the south as planned, the formation approaches from the southeast. The error adds 7 minutes to the flight time. 7 minutes means the different groups arrive over the target at slightly different times instead of simultaneously as planned. The element of surprise, the critical component upon which the entire mission depends, evaporates. Romanian radar stations detect the formation at 12:23 hours. Alarm sirens wail across Ploiești. German flak crews sprint to their positions. Romanian fighter squadrons scramble from 3 airfields. By 12:45 hours, the defenses are fully alert and waiting. The first group of B-24 seconds, the 376 bomb group, leading the attack, crests the final ridgeline and Ploiești comes into view. The refineries sprawl across the landscape. Steel towers, processing units, storage tanks, exactly as they appeared in the reconnaissance photographs. But now, tracer fire arcs up from 100 different positions. 88mm flak guns fire at point-blank range. The shells are designed to detonate at altitude, but at 30 meters above ground, they function as direct fire weapons. The gunners can see the bombers with naked eyes. They do not need radar. They do not need sophisticated fire control systems. They simply point their guns at the aluminum shapes roaring past at 350 kilometers per hour and pull the triggers. A B-24 named Sandman takes a direct hit. The shell penetrates the bomb bay. 4,000 pounds of high explosives detonate instantly. The aircraft disintegrates. One moment it is a functional bomber with 10 living men inside. The next moment it is an expanding cloud of aluminum fragments, burning fuel, and human remains raining down on Refinery Complex 7. Lieutenant Colonel Baker, flying Hell's Wench, sees Sandman explode off his right wing. Debris strikes his aircraft. He hears the impacts, sharp metallic clangs as shrapnel punctures the fuselage. His co-pilot shouts something, but the words are lost in the noise. Baker's assigned target is Refinery 5, the Concordia Vega installation. He can see it ahead, perhaps 2 kilometers distant. The cracking towers rise 60 meters into the air. The primary processing building is rectangular, steel-framed, easily identifiable. But his aircraft is already damaged. The number 3 engine is trailing smoke. Oil pressure is dropping. Hydraulic fluid is leaking. He can see it streaming past his side window, a fine mist of red fluid vaporizing in the airstream. He could abort. He could pull up, gain altitude, turn away. The mission allows for individual aircraft to break off if they sustain critical damage. No one would question his decision. But Refinery 5 is right there. 2 kilometers. 30 seconds at current speed. Baker maintains course. Flak shells explode around Hell's Wench. The cockpit fills with smoke. Something strikes Baker in the left arm, shrapnel, perhaps, or a cockpit instrument torn loose by blast overpressure. He ignores it. His right hand grips the control yoke. His left hand rests on the throttles. The bombardier, positioned in the nose compartment, calls out, "Target in sight. Bomb bay doors open. 10 seconds to release." Tracer rounds stitch across the bomber's right wing. Fuel begins streaming from punctured tanks. The fuel does not ignite immediately. Not yet, but it will. Any spark, any electrical short, any fragment of hot metal, and the wing becomes a torch. 5 seconds. Baker holds the aircraft steady. The control yoke vibrates in his hand. Every instinct screams at him to pull up, to gain altitude, to get away from the wall of fire rising from the refineries below. Bombs away. 4,000 pounds of high explosives drop from the bomb bay. The aircraft lurches upward, suddenly lighter. The bombardier calls, "Good release, target hit." Baker begins to pull up, but the fuel streaming from the wing ignites. The flames spread instantly, consuming the entire right wing from root to tip. The wing structure begins to fail. The aileron control cables burn through. Hell's wench begins to roll right. Baker fights it, applying full left aileron and left rudder. The aircraft responds sluggishly. The fire is spreading to the fuselage now. Behind them, Baker's bombs impact Refinery 5's primary cracking tower. The structure collapses. Secondary explosions follow. Fuel lines rupture. Storage tanks ignite. The refinery begins to burn. But Baker does not see this. He is focused on keeping his aircraft airborne for another 30 seconds. 40 seconds. Long enough to clear the refinery complex and give his crew a chance to bail out. The right wing fails completely. The aircraft enters an uncontrollable spin. Centrifugal force pins Baker to his seat. He cannot reach the bailout alarm. He cannot reach the intercom. Hell's wench impacts the ground 2 kilometers northeast of Refinery 5. The remaining fuel and bombs detonate on impact. There are no survivors. Lieutenant Colonel Addison Baker dies at 13:14 hours. He is 32 years old. He has been married for 8 years. His wife is pregnant with their second child. The child will be born 4 months from now. Baker will never meet his daughter. The Medal of Honor citation will read, "For conspicuous gallantry and intrepidity above and beyond the call of duty." On 1st August 1943, Lieutenant Colonel Baker led his formation on a strategic bombing mission to the Ploiești oil refineries in Romania. Despite severe damage to his aircraft from anti-aircraft fire, he pressed home his attack, successfully bombing his assigned target before his aircraft was destroyed. His extraordinary heroism and devotion to duty were in keeping with the highest traditions of military service. The citation will not mention that his bombs destroyed approximately 2% of Ploiești's refining capacity. They will not calculate the cost-benefit ratio. They will not ask whether destroying 2% of one refinery justifies the death of a skilled pilot and his 9 crew members. War does not traffic in such questions. War demands sacrifice and calls it heroism. War requires death and names it duty. August 1st, 1943, 14:03 hours, Ploiești, Romania. The raid is over. The last B-24 seconds disappear toward the south, trailing smoke, engines sputtering, some barely airborne. The flak guns fall silent, the fighter aircraft return to their bases, and Ploiești burns. 11 refineries attacked, 7 sustained damage, ranging from moderate to severe. 4 remain essentially untouched, either missed by the attacking aircraft or protected by the intensity of defensive fire that forced bombers to divert to secondary targets. Refinery 5, the Concordia Vega installation that killed Lieutenant Colonel Baker, is the most heavily damaged. The primary cracking tower has collapsed. 3 distillation units are destroyed. 2 storage tanks are burning. The fires will continue for 3 days before being brought under control. Refinery 7 has lost its main processing building. Refinery 3 sustained damage to its rail loading facilities. Refinery 9 reports destruction of 4 storage tanks and 1 pump station. Romanian engineers begin damage assessment immediately. They walk through still-burning wreckage, clipboards in hand, cataloging destruction. Collapsed towers, ruptured pipelines, destroyed electrical substations, damaged rail sidings. The preliminary report, delivered to German authorities at 18:30 hours, estimates that refining capacity has been reduced by approximately 42%. Repairs will require between 6 and 12 weeks, depending on the availability of replacement equipment and skilled labor. 42%. 532 American airmen died or were captured to achieve a 42% reduction in capacity. But the report includes a note that will prove critical. Most of the damage is to ancillary systems loading facilities, storage tanks, support structures. The core refining equipment, the cracking towers, the distillation columns, the catalytic converters, is surprisingly resilient. These are massive steel structures designed to withstand high temperatures and pressures. They do not collapse easily. They do not burn readily. Replacing a destroyed storage tank takes 3 weeks. Replacing a cracking tower takes 18 months. And the American bombs primarily destroyed storage tanks. Within 3 weeks, Romanian engineers restore refining capacity to 75% of pre-raid levels. Within 6 weeks, 88%. Within 8 weeks, 93%. By November 1943, Ploiești produces more refined fuel than it did before Operation Tidal Wave, because damaged units have been replaced with newer, more efficient equipment. The mathematics are brutal and final. 532 men died to reduce German fuel supplies by an amount recovered in 47 days. Was it worth it? The question is meaningless. War does not deal in worth. War deals in necessity. And the Allied command deemed it necessary to strike Ploiești to demonstrate reach, to inflict some damage, any damage, on Germany's fuel supply chain. But the raid sends another message, one that German and Romanian commanders understand immediately. Allies can reach Ploiești. They will return. And next time, they will bring more bombers, better intelligence, improved tactics. The fuel still flows, but the threat is now constant. Every train that departs Ploiești travels under the shadow of American bomber formations. Every refinery operates knowing that bombs may fall at any moment. The arithmetic of war has changed. Ploiești is no longer a secure asset. It is a target. And targets, eventually, are destroyed. April 5th, 1944. Ploiești, Romania. 08:47 hours. I returned to the railway platform where this story began. The same location, the same petroleum smell, though fainter now. The same refinery towers rising against the sky, though some bear scorch marks from the August raid. Ion Popescu is still here. He has aged visibly in the 8 months since Operation Tidal Wave. The grey in his hair has spread. The lines around his eyes have deepened. He moves more slowly, more carefully, like a man who has seen too much and expects to see worse. He has supervised 643 fuel shipments since 1941. Today will be number 644. But the routine has changed. The urgency has intensified. A locomotive pulls alongside the platform. The same Class 50 engine, or one identical to it at this point, they blur together in memory. Otto Schmidt is no longer the engineer. Schmidt died in February, his locomotive strafed by American fighters near Miskolc. The new engineer is younger, less experienced. He has made this journey only 7 times. The loading proceeds with mechanical efficiency. 72 tank cars, 23,000 litres each. 1,656,000 litres total. But watch the Romanian workers. Notice how they constantly glance at the sky. Notice how they pause at unexpected sounds. They are listening for air raid sirens. They are anticipating the next attack, because the Americans have returned. Since Operation Tidal Wave, Allied bombers have struck Ploiești 17 additional times. The raids are more sophisticated now. Fighter escorts accompany the bombers P-38 Lightnings and P-51 Mustangs with drop tanks extending their range. Pathfinder aircraft mark targets with colored smoke bombs. Bombing accuracy improves with each mission. On April 15th, 1944, 10 days from now, 457 B-17 Flying Fortress and B-24 Liberator bombers will strike Ploiești in a coordinated raid. They will drop 1,392 tons of bombs. Refinery 3 will lose 70% of its capacity. Refinery 8 will be shut down completely for 6 weeks. On May 5th, 485 heavy bombers will return. On May 18th, 392 bombers. On May 31st, 438 bombers. On June 6th, D-Day, while Allied forces land in Normandy, 236 bombers will strike Ploiești, while the world's attention focuses on France. The cumulative damage is catastrophic. By July 1944, Ploiești's refining capacity will be reduced to 31% of its January 1944 level. The refineries still operate, but they operate at drastically reduced efficiency. Bomb craters pockmark the complexes. Collapsed towers lie across railway sidings. Storage tanks resemble Swiss cheese punctured by bomb fragments, leaking fuel into the soil. Romanian engineers work continuously, repairing damage as fast as American bombers inflict it. They patch ruptured pipelines. They clear debris from rail tracks. They rebuild destroyed electrical substations. But it is a losing battle. The Americans can destroy faster than the Romanians can repair. And then there is the matter of German fuel consumption, which continues to rise even as Romanian production falls. In January 1944, Germany consumed 420 million litres of fuel monthly for military operations. By April 1944, consumption has risen to 468 million litres monthly. The increase reflects intensified combat operations on all fronts. The Eastern Front, where Soviet forces advance relentlessly westward. The Italian Front, where Allied armies grind northward through mountain valleys. And soon the Western Front, where Allied invasion of France will require massive German defensive operations. German synthetic fuel production remains relatively stable at approximately 792 million litres monthly. But Romanian oil imports have declined from 483 million litres monthly in January 1943 to 276 million litres monthly in April 1944. The gap between supply and demand narrows every month. Total fuel supply, 1,068 million litres monthly. Total fuel consumption, military and civilian, 1,215 million litres monthly. Deficit, 147 million litres monthly. Germany is now drawing down its strategic reserves at a rate of 147 million litres every 30 days. The strategic reserve stockpile stood at approximately 2 billion litres in January 1944. At current depletion rates, the reserves will be exhausted by October 1944, unless something changes. Unless Romania can restore production to previous levels. Unless German synthetic fuel plants can dramatically increase output. Unless German forces can reduce their fuel consumption through tactical victories that shorten defensive lines. Unless. The arithmetic offers no comfort. The trend lines point in only one direction. Downward. Popescu watches the train depart. Number 644. 1,656,000 litres heading north toward Germany. He has done this 643 times before. Once more makes little difference. Except today is different. Today, in Bucharest, 530 kilometers southeast of where Popescu stands, Romanian politicians meet in secret session. They discuss a question that would have been unthinkable 2 years ago. Should Romania abandon its alliance with Germany? The arguments in favor are compelling. Soviet forces have recaptured Odessa and are advancing toward the Romanian border. The Red Army will reach Romanian territory within weeks, perhaps days. Germany can no longer protect Romania. Germany can barely protect itself. Romania has lost 280,000 soldiers, fighting alongside the Wehrmacht in Russia. For what? So that Germany can drain Romanian oil fields, while offering nothing in return except threats and demands for increased production? The arguments against abandonment are equally compelling. Germany still occupies Romanian territory, the entire northwestern region along the Hungarian border. German troops are stationed in Bucharest, Ploiești, and every other strategically significant city. If Romania attempts to switch sides, German forces will simply seize control and continue extracting oil by force. The politicians debate through the afternoon. No decision is reached. But the conversation itself represents a fundamental shift. 2 years ago, such a discussion would have been treason. Today, it is pragmatism. Marshal Ion Antonescu, Romania's dictator and Hitler's loyal ally, is not present at this meeting. He does not know it is occurring. When he learns of it, and he will, eventually he will move to arrest those involved. But Antonescu's time is running out. The mathematics have turned against him as surely as they have turned against Germany. In 4 months and 18 days, King Michael will order Antonescu's arrest. In 4 months and 18 days, Romania will switch sides. In 4 months and 18 days, the fuel will stop flowing. August 23rd, 1944. Bucharest, Romania. 10:20 hours. King Michael of Romania, 22 years old, summons Marshal Ion Antonescu to the royal palace. Antonescu arrives at 35 hours. He expects a routine briefing on military matters. Instead, he finds himself under arrest. The coup proceeds swiftly. Romanian troops surround key government buildings. Communications are cut to German military headquarters. By 1400 hours, Antonescu is in custody. By 1600 hours, Romania announces its withdrawal from the Axis alliance and declares war on Germany. By 1800 hours, Romanian forces begin engaging German troops still stationed on Romanian soil. There is no transition period, no diplomatic negotiations, no gradual reduction in oil shipments. The decision is immediate and absolute. Romanian engineers, acting on direct orders from the new government, shut down the refineries. Not slowly, not carefully, immediately. At Refinery 5, the engineer on duty closes the main crude oil feed valve. The flow stops. The cracking towers, which have operated continuously since 1940, begin to cool. The distillation columns fall silent. The pumps stop. The electrical generators spin down. At Refinery 7, workers open drain valves, purging pipelines of residual fuel to prevent fires during the shutdown. Thousands of liters of gasoline and diesel spill into containment basins where they will be later recovered, but not by Germany. At Refinery 3, the loading terminal ceases operations. A train sits half-loaded on the siding, 47 tank cars, filled, 25 still empty. The loading crew stops mid-shift. The remaining 25 cars will never be filled. The 47 loaded cars will never depart. They will sit on that siding until Soviet forces arrive in November and confiscate them. Across all 11 refinery complexes, the same scene repeats. Valves close, pumps stop. Flames atop flare stacks extinguish for the first time in 4 years. The constant roar of machinery, the sound that has defined Ploiești since 1940, fades to silence. Within 6 hours, Romania's oil industry ceases to exist as a German asset. Ion Popescu stands on the railway platform at 1847 hours. No trains depart today. None departed yesterday. None will depart tomorrow. The tracks are empty for the first time since 1939. 643 trains, 1,062,000,000 liters of fuel delivered to Germany over 3 years and 2 months. And now, nothing. Popescu is 50 years old. For 3 years, he has coordinated fuel shipments that enabled German armies to advance, German aircraft to bomb, German submarines to hunt. He did not fire a weapon. He did not drop a bomb. He simply ensured that trains departed on schedule, fully loaded, bound for Germany. But every liter he loaded enabled additional kilometers of advance, additional sorties, additional bombardments. He knew this. Everyone who worked at Ploiești knew this. You cannot coordinate fuel shipments during wartime and claim ignorance of their purpose. How many died because of the fuel that flowed through this platform? The question is impossible to answer precisely, but estimates can be made. 1,062,000,000 liters divided among Wehrmacht ground forces, Panzer divisions, Luftwaffe, and Kriegsmarine. How many tank kilometers? How many flight hours? How many enemy soldiers killed? How many cities bombed? How many ships sunk? The arithmetic is staggering and horrible. But arithmetic does not absolve. Numbers do not grant forgiveness. Ion Popescu loaded the trains, and the trains fed the war, and the war consumed millions. He walks away from the platform. He will never return to this place. In 16 months, he will emigrate to Argentina, carrying guilt that no confession can relieve and no distance can escape. In Berlin, the news arrives at 1740 hours. Romania has switched sides. The oil has stopped flowing. German fuel reserves stand at 47 million liters, approximately 11 days of normal military operations. 11 days. After that, unless alternative sources can be rapidly secured, the Wehrmacht will be forced to implement emergency fuel conservation measures. There are no alternative sources. German synthetic fuel plants cannot increase production overnight. The Fischer-Tropsch process operates at maximum capacity already. Building additional plants requires 18 to 24 months. Germany does not have 18 months. Germany does not have 18 weeks. The Oberkommando der Wehrmacht issues immediate orders. Reduce all non-essential fuel consumption. Cancel training exercises. Limit transport movements. prioritize fuel allocation to combat units engaged with enemy forces. Panzer divisions receive their reduced allocations. Commanders are informed that fuel supplies will be restricted to 50% of previous levels. 50% means half the operational radius, half the mobility, half the ability to conduct mobile defensive operations against Soviet forces advancing from the east. The Luftwaffe receives similar orders. Sortie rates must be reduced by 40% immediately. Fighter wings that previously flew 300 sorties daily must reduce to 180. Bomber wings cease operations almost entirely strategic. Bombing requires fuel for long-range missions, and fuel no longer exists in sufficient quantities. U-boat command orders all submarines to remain in port unless engaged in active combat patrol. New patrols are postponed indefinitely. The Battle of the Atlantic, already decisively lost, effectively ends, not because Allied anti-submarine warfare has become insurmountable, though it has, but because U-boats cannot patrol without diesel fuel. The entire German war machine begins slowing down, not from battlefield defeats, not from strategic errors, from simple arithmetic. The fuel has run out. September 1944, October 1944, November 1944, December 1944, January 1945, February 1945, March 1945, April 1945. 8 months from the loss of Romanian oil to Germany's final surrender. Let us trace the collapse through numbers. German fuel production. September 1944. 792 million litres from synthetic plants, plus 72 million litres from remaining minor sources. Hungary, Austria equals 864 million litres total. German fuel consumption. September 1944. 495 million litres for military operations, plus 680 million litres for civilian use and industry, equals 1,175 million litres. Deficit, 311 million litres monthly. The strategic reserve stockpile continues to decline. By October 1944, reserves fall to 430 million litres. By November, 119 million litres. By December, the reserves are exhausted completely, and then the Allied strategic bombing campaign shifts focus to German synthetic fuel plants. On May 12, 1944, Allied bombers struck the synthetic fuel plant at Leuna for the first time. Moderate damage, production reduced by 18% temporarily. By September 1944, the plant had been struck 7 additional times. Cumulative damage, severe. Production capacity reduced to 42% of January 1944 levels. The plant at Ploiești receives its first major raid on June 29, 1944. 456 B-17 bombers drop 1,230 tons of high explosives. The plant ceases production entirely for 3 weeks. When operations resume, capacity stands at 57% of previous levels. Blackhammer, first major raid. August 7, 1944. Capacity reduced to 39% by November 1944. Berlin, first major raid. May 29, 1944. Capacity reduced to 41% by December 1944. One by one, the synthetic fuel plants are systematically destroyed. German engineers work continuously to repair damage, but the Allied bombing campaign intensifies faster than repairs can be completed. By March 1945, total German synthetic fuel production has collapsed to 117 million litres. Monthly 14.7% of January 1944 levels, 117 million litres. Germany requires 495 million litres monthly for military operations alone. Deficit, 378 million litres monthly. The Wehrmacht begins abandoning vehicles beside roads because there is no fuel to drive them. Panzer divisions that once fielded 200 tanks now operate with 30 to 40 tanks. The rest sit immobilized in staging areas. Fully functional but useless without gasoline. On April 16, 1945, the final major German offensive operation, the Battle of Bautzen in eastern Germany, involves approximately 150 tanks. In June 1941, Operation Barbarossa launched with 5,300 tanks. The Wehrmacht's armored strength has declined by 97%, not primarily through combat losses, but through fuel starvation. The Luftwaffe possesses approximately 3,000 operational aircraft in March 1945, but only 400 can fly on any given day due to fuel shortages. The revolutionary Messerschmitt Me-262 jet fighter, technologically superior to any Allied aircraft, sits grounded because jet fuel production has ceased entirely after Allied bombing raids destroyed the synthetic fuel plants that produce kerosene-based jet fuel. The Kriegsmarine's remaining U-boats stay in port. Surface vessels remain anchored. The entire German naval force has become a static coastal defense system, unable to maneuver or patrol due to lack of diesel fuel. The collapse is total. The Wehrmacht cannot defend. The Luftwaffe cannot fly. The Kriegsmarine cannot sail, not because soldiers lack courage, not because equipment is obsolete, because the fuel has run out. On May 8, 1945, Germany surrenders. The final calculation. From August 23, 1944, loss of Romanian oil, to May 8, 1945, surrender, 258 days elapsed. Romania had been providing approximately 276 million litres monthly to Germany. 258 days equals 8.53 months. Multiply. 2,354,000,000 litres. 2.3 billion litres of fuel that Germany did not receive. 2.3 billion litres that could have powered tanks, aircraft, submarines. 2.3 billion litres that might have extended the war by several additional months if available. But they were not available. The train stopped running, the fuel stopped flowing, and the war ended. I returned to Ploiești one final time. The year is 1947, 2 years after the war's end. The refineries are operating again, but under different management. Soviet occupation forces control Romania now. The fuel flows east toward Moscow instead of west toward Berlin. The railway platform is unchanged. The same steel rails, the same wooden planks, the same petroleum smell, though fainter now than during wartime. Ion Popescu is gone. He emigrated to Argentina in 1946, unable to continue living in the place where he spent 3 years enabling war. He will die in Buenos Aires in 1968, age 73, having never spoken publicly about his role in the Romanian oil industry during World War II. Otto Schmidt is gone, killed by American fighters in February 1944. He is buried in a German military cemetery in Hungary, far from his home in Bavaria. Lieutenant Colonel Addison Baker is gone, killed over Ploiești in August 1943. He is buried in the American military cemetery at Carthage, Tunisia. His daughter, born 4 months after his death, never knew him. The trains still run. I watch one depart now, a Soviet locomotive pulling 72 tank cars loaded with Romanian oil, 1,656,000 litres heading east. The sound is the same, the deep chuffing of the engine, the metallic clatter of wheels on rails, the rhythmic click-clack as each car passes over the rail joints. But the destination has changed. The empire has changed. The mathematics remain constant. I walk along the platform where Ion Popescu once stood, 643 times, clipboard in hand, checking manifests, ensuring that every litre was accounted for. The wood is weathered now. The paint has faded. But the platform endures. History does not erase itself from places like this. It soaks into the wood, into the steel, into the soil beneath the tracks. You can still feel it if you stand here long enough. The weight of all those trains, all those litres, all those deaths enabled by the fuel that flowed through this single point. 3 years and 2 months. 1,062,000,000 litres. 643 trains. Let me translate those numbers one final time into human terms. 1,062,000,000 litres of fuel allocated across German military forces from 1941 to 1944 enabled approximately 412 million kilometers of ground vehicle travel, 7 million flight hours for Luftwaffe aircraft, 18,000 U-boat patrol days in the Atlantic, the deaths of an estimated 840,000 enemy soldiers through direct combat operations, the destruction of approximately 94,000 enemy vehicles, tanks, and aircraft. The bombing of 417 cities across Europe and the Soviet Union. These are not precise figures. War does not lend itself to precision. But they are reasonable estimates based on German fuel consumption rates, operational records, and post-war analysis. They represent the minimum scale of destruction enabled by Romanian oil flowing through this platform. 840,000 dead, minimum. But let us be clear. This is not the fault of Ion Popescu or Otto Schmidt, or the thousands of Romanian workers who refined the oil and loaded the trains. They were components in a system. They performed their functions. They followed their orders. And yet, there is a question that haunts this place. A question that has no comfortable answer. A question that applies not only to Ploiești, but to every industrial facility that fed the machinery of war. At what point does participation become complicity? At what point does following orders become moral culpability? At what point does the man loading fuel onto a train become responsible for the deaths caused by that fuel? The law answered this question at Nuremberg. The tribunals established precedents. Following orders was deemed insufficient defense for enabling atrocities. Participation in the machinery of war, even in seemingly mundane logistics roles, carried moral weight. But Nuremberg focused on the architects of genocide, the commanders of death camps, the planners of aggressive war. The tribunals did not prosecute railway engineers. They did not charge refinery workers. They did not arrest the men who loaded fuel onto trains. Perhaps because the numbers would have been too large. Perhaps because the guilt would have encompassed entire populations. Perhaps because the Allies themselves employed millions of civilians in similar logistics roles. American factory workers building bombers, British dock workers loading ammunition, Soviet railway operators moving supplies to the front. If you prosecute the man who loads fuel for Germany, you must prosecute the man who loads fuel for America. If you declare the Romanian refinery worker guilty, you must declare the American assembly line worker equally guilty. The logic extends infinitely in all directions until culpability becomes universal and therefore meaningless. So the law carved out distinctions: planners and executioners, guilty; soldiers following lawful orders, not guilty; civilians performing economic roles, not addressed. But distinctions do not absolve. They merely redistribute guilt into categories that jurisprudence can manage. Ion Popescu knew what the fuel enabled. He read newspapers. He heard radio broadcasts. He knew that German armies were advancing into the Soviet Union, that cities were being bombed, that soldiers and civilians were dying by the millions. He knew his trains carried the fuel that powered that destruction. He loaded the trains anyway, because refusing would have meant arrest, imprisonment, possibly execution, because his family depended on his income, because the trains would be loaded whether he participated or not. Refusing would accomplish nothing except his own destruction. These are not excuses. They are context. And context matters, even when it does not absolve. Otto Schmidt knew his locomotive carried fuel for war. He saw the Wehrmacht trucks at distribution centers when he delivered his cargo. He heard the aircraft overhead. He was not naive. He was not ignorant. He drove the trains anyway. For the same reasons Popescu loaded them. Because the alternative was worse. Because one man cannot stop a war. Because participation seemed, at the time, like the only rational choice. And perhaps it was rational. Perhaps survival is always rational. Perhaps we cannot judge men who chose to live rather than die for principles that would have made no difference to the war's outcome. But we can remember, we can stand on this platform and acknowledge what happened here. We can speak the numbers aloud: 1,062,000,000 liters, 643 trains, 840,000 dead minimum. We can recognize that wars are fought not only by soldiers with rifles, but by refineries, railways, factories, and logistics networks. That every modern war is an industrial enterprise requiring millions of participants, most of whom never fire a shot, but whose labor is essential to the killing. We can understand that the fuel flowing through Ploiești was not merely gasoline and diesel. It was potential energy that converted directly into kinetic violence. Every liter loaded onto a train represented future deaths. Deaths that could be calculated, predicted, and quantified with reasonable accuracy by anyone who understood military fuel consumption rates. The men who worked here understood this. They were not fools. They were not innocent. They were knowing participants in an industrial system that converted Romanian petroleum into German military action, into Allied and Soviet casualties. And they did it anyway. Because humans, when faced with impossible choices, generally choose survival over sacrifice. Because individual morality collapses under the weight of systemic violence. Because one man loading one train cannot stop a war, but he can save his own life by continuing to load trains. This is not forgiveness. This is recognition. The recognition that industrial warfare implicates entire populations in moral compromise. That participation becomes inescapable. That guilt distributes across millions of people in such small fractions that no single individual bears crushing responsibility. But the collective weight remains staggering. The platform is empty now. The sun is setting. The refineries continue their work under Soviet management, feeding a different empire, enabling different wars, perpetuating the same mathematics of fuel and violence. I turn to leave. But before I do, I place my hand on the wooden platform railing. The wood is smooth, worn by 3 decades of hands gripping it. Workers steadying themselves, engineers checking documents, soldiers waiting for transport. How many hands touched this railing between 1941 and 1944? How many of those hands belong to men who are dead now? How many touched this wood and then went home to families, lived full lives, died peacefully in their beds decades later, having never spoken of what they did here? The railing does not answer. Wood cannot speak, but it remembers in its way. The pressure of hands, the weight of years, the passage of men who carried the knowledge of what they enabled. I remove my hand. I walk away. The platform remains behind me, silent and enduring. Somewhere in Argentina, an old man named Ion Popescu wakes from nightmares about trains that never arrive. Somewhere in Bavaria, a family tends the grave of Otto Schmidt, believing he died serving his country with honor. Somewhere in America, a woman who never knew her father visits a military cemetery in Tunisia every August 1st and wonders what he thought about in his final 15 seconds. The war ended 23 years ago. The fuel stopped flowing. The empire collapsed. But the mathematics remain, eternal and unforgiving. 1,062,000,000 liters equals 840,000 deaths minimum. 643 trains equals 643 opportunities to say no. 643 moments when one man could have chosen differently. 643 times when individual courage might have meant something. But courage is easier to demand in retrospect than to summon in the moment. Easier to praise when the power face consequences fall on others than to practice when the consequences fall on yourself. This is what Ploiești teaches. Not that Romanian oil was important, we knew that already. Not that logistics determine war outcomes, Sun Tzu understood that 2,000 years ago. Not that industrial systems implicate entire populations in violence. Hiroshima and Dresden demonstrated that sufficiently. No, Ploiești teaches something simpler and more terrible. That ordinary people, doing ordinary jobs, for ordinary reasons, can enable extraordinary evil. That participation in systemic violence does not require ideology or hatred. That the man loading fuel onto a train can be a decent father, a loving husband, a good neighbor, and still contribute to the deaths of hundreds of thousands. That guilt, when distributed widely enough, becomes invisible. That complicity, when shared broadly enough, becomes normal. That the machinery of war requires not monsters, but functionaries. Not fanatics, but professionals. Not ideologues, but workers who show up on time, perform their duties competently, and go home to dinner. This is the lesson written in steel and petroleum on this platform. This is the knowledge that soaks into the wood and lingers in the air long after the trains have stopped running. The fuel fed an army. The army fought a war. The war killed millions. And the man loading the fuel was just doing his job. Just doing his job. The most dangerous words in any language. The battlefield is silent now, but echoes remain. Forgotten footsteps on frozen ground. You heard them today. And now you remember.